thank you all very much for coming. We'll get to that in a moment. The public service announcements, we have a few copies of that spectacular work that was edited by tradition, done by tradition. It is a beautiful, beautiful memorial volume dedicated to the father of Dr. Lamm. It's available, a few copies, they're 60 shekel each. This is on the honor system. I feel we won't have a problem with this crowd. And there's some money there, and if you need another copy, I know I do, then say that. I want to open with a thanks to Rabbi Miller. We are in your home, your domain, and our families go back from the beginning of time. And sort of the friendship we're deeply, deeply. Good evening, and thank you for joining us this evening to learn Torah in honor of our parents, Rabbi Norman and Mindy Lamm. My son, Ari Lamm, was in his office at Teaneck 2 months ago when he received a call from Steve Savitsky, who I think many of you probably know. And it said to Ari, I'm in a taxi in Jerusalem, and the driver insists on talking to you. We were playing some Jewish geography, and when I told him you were Rabbi and Mrs. Lamm's son, and I knew you well, he insisted I dial you now. So the taxi driver pulled over, gets on the phone, and says, listen, I drove your grandparents for years. I drive your Aunt Chaya when she was in Israel. I've taken many members of your family to Eretz Chaim Cemetery to visit your grandfather's parents. Your grandparents need to be brought to Israel and be buried here. I know this is what they wanted, so get to it and make it happen. This is an amazing country. To those of you who joined us yesterday for the beautiful reinterment of my parents at the Eretz Chaim Cemetery, thank you for joining us again this evening. And for those of you who were not there, thank you for joining us this evening as together we learn Torah from two outstanding scholars and Jewish political activists. There's something very special about studying at the feet of people who not only study Torah, but who put it into action, inserting Kedusha into our world. When the family convened to discuss who we would hope would teach us and tribute to our beloved parents, these were actually very easy choices. That they agreed to do this is a wonderful tribute to our parents. This evening, we're privileged to hear from Rabbi Shmuel Goldman and Rabbi Hampton. Like all speakers, I will tell you that they need no introduction, and then promptly introduce them. Rabbi Shmuel Goldman served as rabbi of the Congregation of Torah in Englewood, New Jersey for 33 years. Rabbi Goldman served for over 20 years as instructor of Bible and philosophy. Here we probably call that Tanakh. At Yeshiva University, and he continues to appear as a visiting scholar and lecturer in a wide variety of settings around the world. He is past president of the RCA, the Rabbinical Council of America, and currently occupies a critical role, chairman of the committee overseeing the RCA's policies and standards for conversion to Judaism. Rabbi Goldman serves on the board and advisory committees of numerous common organizations. He has received many honors and awards for his decades of service to the Jewish community. His 5-volume set on Parshas Shavua, Unlocking the Torah, personal favorite of mine, which was given to me as a gift from my brother Josh. What happened was we were in shul and he had to say to every week, still of our Torah from people buying my own set. It's a delightful deep dive into the challenges and penetrating insights of the Parsha. Rabbi Hinton is the founder and dean of Nishmat, one of today's most plain Jewish educators. In 2017, she was recognized as Yakirat Yerushalayim, one of Jerusalem's distinguished citizens. Together with her late husband, Rabbi Yehuda Henkin, Zichrono Livracha, she created the role of Yoatzot Halacha, who has since addressed more than 300,000 halachic questions from across the world. She has, with this program, literally revolutionized Jewish life around the world. My parents were early supporters of this program and were great, great admirers of the Hindu family. On behalf of the Lamm family, we thank you, wonderful folks. We thank the wonderful folks here for their hospitality. We welcome you all. Thank you very much.
goes without saying, I am deeply, deeply honored that the Lamm family has asked me to pay tribute to Rabbi Dr. Norman and Mrs. Lamm this evening. But that's an impossible task. How do you, in a few moments, pay tribute to two individuals who set the course of our community at a critical juncture of our history? So I'm not going to try. Instead, I'd rather you take my words in a different way. I'd like to simply share with you the observations of one rabbi who had the schus to interface with Lambs on a variety of levels. First as their student, as Rav serving under their aegis, as a community rabbi of their children, and as family friend. And then when I'm finished, I'd ask you to take those observations and multiply them thousands and thousands fold. Factor in all of the sentiments of all of those people who knowingly or unknowingly were influenced and enriched by the Lambs. Because only through that multiplication can appropriate tribute be paid. I'd like to frame my remarks by asking you to return with me for a moment to the scene of Matan Torah, to the moments before Revelation. For there, immediately before Matan Torah, we find a very strange interchange between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Moshe. Torah tells us, "Vayir Hashem al Har Sinai, vayikra Hashem Moshe al Rosh Hahar." Hashem descended on the mountain again and called Moshe to come to the summit. No sooner does Moshe hit the summit of the mountain than HaKadosh Baruch Hu turns to him and says, "Reid ha'eibah, go down, tell the nation that they cannot and should not touch the mountain of Revelation, lest they die." Moshe, with what seems to be a bit of chutzpah, turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and says, "Lo yuchal ha'amaros, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to use my words, what are you giving me busy work for? You asked me to come up, you're telling me to go down. You've already told them that they can't touch the mountain. Why are you sending me back down?" To which Hashem responds with a phrase that my parents used to tell me, that I promised never to tell my children, which I often did, because I told you so. Turns to Moshe and he says, "Reid, go down." Moshe responds, goes down and gives Hashem's instructions to climb this road. And we would fully expect that the next step would be that Moshe would again go up. And all of a sudden, no sooner does he hit the bottom of the mountain, and the Torah tells us, "Yadaber Hashem es kol hadvarim ha'ela lemor, anochi Hashem Elokecha," in Revelation begins. And you could almost imagine Moshe going, "Wait, Kadosh Baruch Hu, look, I'm not supposed to be up there." And the only way I believe to understand this narrative is to recognize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is transmitting to Moshe a critical leadership lesson. A lesson, however, that's so important that he's not going to teach it to Moshe frontally. Rather, as he often does during Moshe's career, he manipulates events so that Moshe will realize it for himself. The lesson is clear. Moshe, when Revelation begins, you belong at the foot of the mountain. Your leadership will have to emerge from within. You're going to have to learn to care about this, to connect with this people. And there will come a moment, there will come times when you will ascend, you will rise up that mountain. That connection that you make in those first moments can never break. And that has to be the mark of your leadership throughout. Fast forward with me for a moment now to the 1950s in America, the Jewish community at that time. The landscape at that time is vastly different from the landscape that we now see. The non-traditional movements are ascendant. Orthodoxy is on the ropes. To the point that sociologists are predicting, to quote one of their number, orthodoxy has an attenuated existence. The synagogue, the Orthodox synagogue, is a case study of institutional decay. Orthodoxy will have to accept that the synagogues will become a sectarian institution for a select few. It's clear that leadership is needed. But it can't just be any leadership. It has to be erudite, it has to be sophisticated, it has to be articulate, it has to compete. It has to compete in the marketplace of ideas. But most importantly, it has to be a leadership that cares. It has to be a leadership that rises from within. It sets an example to the community to follow, both in word and in deed. It is into this cauldron that Rabbi and Mrs. Lamm stepped, as they began a leadership journey that would take them to the highest echelons of Jewish leadership. It would be a journey where the two of them would work in sync with each other in an exceptional way. Individuals each would complement each other, each growing comfortable and more comfortable in their roles. But above all, it would be a journey that would take us along. A journey that would resonate to our concerns and our challenges. A journey that wouldn't leave us behind for a moment. A journey that would set an example that might at times be beyond our grasp, but would never be beyond our reach. They set an example for us and set a standard for us by creating and carving out a course for the community that was clear and incisive. To the Lamm's centrist orthodoxy, modern orthodoxy was not to be an orthodoxy of concession or an orthodoxy of ease, but an orthodoxy, a Judaism that was authentic Judaism, created out of an intricate balance. A Judaism that would enrich the world as it was enriched by the world. Rabbi Lamm, on one hand, would speak beautifully and write beautifully of that which could be gained from outside culture. In Torah Manda, he wrote, grasping a differential equation or a concept in quantum mechanics can let us perceive and reveal godliness in the abstract governance of the universe. An insight into molecular biology or depth psychology or the dynamics of society can inspire in us a fascination with God's creation. And hearing Josh yesterday, I think I can see Mrs. Lamm's influence on the next sentence. A new appreciation of a Beethoven symphony or a Cézanne painting, or the poetry of Wordsworth, can move us to recognize the infinite possibilities of the creative imagination with which the Creator endowed his human creatures. But if we were to learn from an outside world, the Lambs wanted us to understand that our priorities had to be straight. And speaking to his Musmachim as president of the Yeshiva University and as the Rosh HaYeshiva, Rabbi Lamm said, for those of us in the centrist camp, Torah Umada does not imply the co-equality of the two poles. Torah remains the unchallenged and preeminent center of our lives, our community, and our values. And he returned to those students again on another occasion and said to them, continue to immerse yourselves in Torah study. Never stop. Your Torah will be your refuge and your strength, your consolation and your joy, your inspiration to greater aspiration. But lest we think that this was a b'diavad path, lest we think that this was a path chosen because we would have to, not because it was right. The Lambs let us know very, very clearly that this was an imperative, not an option, that this path was what Judaism was meant to be. Speaking to his congregants in 1963, Rabbi Lamm said, one can be truly pious and still oriented to the future. Those who would remove one from the other offend the deepest tenets of our faith. If Torah has no relevance for 1963, listen to these words, then its claims are fraudulent, And 35 centuries of Jewish history are a tragic failure. Torah withdrawn from all of contemporary life into its own little peoples threatens to become a museum piece. And far worse, modern life unblessed by Torah, undirected by halacha, unjudged by Musa, has already shown that it becomes a jungle, and its animals, beasts, and animals. But if they set out a course for us and they made that course clear, they then showed us what it means to face challenge after challenge along the way. First of all, to recognize those challenges and to see them, and then to face them with courage and strength. In 1965, 2 full years before the Six-Day War opened up Israel to so much of diaspora Jewry, Rabbi Lamm stood before his congregation in the Jewish Center and made what I consider to be an extraordinary sermon. He turned to them, and think of the audience now, and he said to them, "We are in Galut. Understand that. Understand that we are in Galut. It may be a large measure of freedom, but a convenient Galut is still a Galut." But then he goes even further. Again, in 1965, he makes a suggestion, a proposal to his congregation that I would wager scarcely a rabbi today would be willing to make. He turns to them and he says, think of the audience, if we are honest about our reasons for not immigrating, then we must at least see to it that our children will go. We must prepare our children for Aliyah before they are settled here. If not all our children, at least each family must decide the one child most fit for immigration and what to be prepared for it. We must decide to train at least one child in that kind of career or profession or business that will enable him to go on Aliyah. We must imbue him with the spirit of Israel and create in him that idealism which will help him fulfill the destiny which all of Israel must ultimately share. 1965 before the Jewish Center. My God, what courage. How many rabbis would do that today? They then also taught us that we have to reach out beyond our borders, beyond our comfort zone. They said, recognize, Rabbi Lamm would speak about the fact that Judaism must be the possession of all Jews, not just a select few. He would talk very beautifully about our relationship with the unaffiliated, the conservative, the reform, the necessity to interface with them, to reach out, as I said, beyond our comfort zone. And they modeled for us what it means to weather criticism and attack from the right and from the left. What it means to weather that criticism and not respond in kind, but remain always dignified and always possessing for self-respect. Speaking of the breach that he was concerned, or the breaches that he was concerned would develop in the Jewish community, Rabbi Lamm spoke of a beautiful interpretation of the last bracha of the Amidah, the culminating bracha. Turning to the Sim Shalom and speaking to the sentence, Baruchenu Avinu Kulanu Ki Echad, Rabbi Lamm says the following: in the words of the daily Amidah, bless us, our Father, all of us together, as if we are one. Even though we suffer sharp differences and sometimes act like enemies instead of family, notwithstanding our impatience and impertinence towards each other, bless us ki echad, to act, the ability to act as if we were one, united in a common destiny, living with each other like brothers and sisters who may have radically different points of view, but recognizing that we are related by blood and faith, and yes, with friendship and fraternity and peace, and even with love, for there can be no greater blessing than this. Challenge after challenge. One needs only look at his sermons and his writings to recognize that every one of them still bears total relevance But beyond all of the speeches, and beyond all of the sermons, and beyond all of the volumes, perhaps what I personally will remember even more is the human warmth with which it was all delivered. I will remember the many visits that Rabbi and Mrs. Lamm made to my community to visit with their children. Visits always accompanied, always, by an encouraging, complimentary. I'll remember the questions that Mrs. Lamm would ask me about my family, my children, how she cared, how she really cared what I would answer. I will cherish the friendships of her children and watch Lamm as their grandchildren do what they're doing. An amazing group. A testament to Mrs. Lamb's extraordinary ability to create a warm, stable, wonderful heart in the face of overwhelming communal responsibility. I remember Rabbi Lamm turning to a group of young rabbis, of which I was one a while ago, and saying to us, every single philosophical discussion you ever had with your community will boil down to one question. Sadiq Virali, Rosh Hashanah, telling us that he was struggling with the same issues that we were struggling with. I remember him turning to me and saying to me what I know he said to others. In fact, I saw him writing. He turned to me and he said, you know, it's been years since I've given a sermon, but every time I hear the tune of Eitz Chaim, I get butterflies. It's his way of telling me if I'm nervous, it's okay for you to be nervous too. I'll remember more than anything your smiles whenever they saw you. Smiles that illuminated the room, but went straight to the heart. Smiles that told you that, no, we really care. Of anybody I know, these two individuals have every right to hold themselves apart, to stand on those pedestals that we created for them in our minds. They didn't. They wouldn't. Every single individual they met, they connected to. And you knew that they cared, and more than that, you knew that you were valued. That's an amazing, amazing talent. And it was that human warmth which made their leadership all the more extraordinary. Yesterday, many of us were present as the family fulfilled Rabbi and Mrs. Lamm's final wish to be buried here in the soil of our homeland, find rest. And in many ways, that was the last leg of an extraordinary journey here on this earth. But tonight, we're saying that that journey has. That all of those individuals of whom I spoke, those thousands in my community, we're attesting to the fact that we're going to stay the path. We're going to continue to learn and gain and have our lives shaped by the lessons that they taught us. And isn't that the greatest tribute of all? The ancient time.
Thank you, Rabbi Goldman, so much. And Rabbi, thank you. Go ahead.
I presume there are both Rabbi, the Lamm family, and honored Sibyl. The task that was bestowed on me this evening is, I think, beyond my stature, and I will try. It certainly is beyond my stature to pay honor to Mindy's and it's beyond my stature to address this honored audience. Forgive me, but I will try to learn together with you. The Meshach comments that there are two people in the Torah who are both described twice with the term ish. Noah twice. He begins his career with Noach ish Sadiq, and at the end of his life, he's identified as Noach ish Ha'adamah. Moshe Rabbeinu is also twice identified as ish. The first time, he's identified by the daughters of Israel as an ish mitzvah. The final time is of the and Meshach comments, we would expect Noah, who secluded himself, to have had the opportunity to become a man of great spirit. Whereas Moshe Rabbeinu, much of his life was occupied with things which were trivial, with Israel, spending time from morning until night. And he needed to judge between people, who need to hear their stories, who need to listen. He wasn't simply delivering the shir klali every morning or once a week. He was listening to people. Meshach comments that for us as Jews, late is via Israel. I think for me, when I think of Rabbi Lamm's greatness, it was a giant. I believe all know that if someone could kindly give me a glass of water, I would appreciate it. There were water bottles. Thank you. Rabbi Lamm was multifaceted. He was a Talmudist. He was a Talmud Chacham of the first rank. He was a philosopher of the first rank. He was an author of the first rank. He was probably one of two. He was one of two great darshanim of the 20th century. The darshan does much more than give a circle. Darshan needs to be a tremendous Talmud Chacham who understands how to deliver, how to build a bridge between Chachmat Chazal, or between Chachmat the Torah, and between the world and the congregation. Rabbi Lamm is a master darshan. It's a gift to history that is thresholds are available to us on the internet. It's been remarked, they're timeless. You can read them as if they were delivered yesterday, and they speak to your mind and they speak to your soul. Rabbi Goldman spoke of Rabbi translated his leader. When I think of Rabbi Lamm, I was one of the countless people in Rabbi Lamm. How he found time to take my calls, to discuss things with me, I don't know. Rabbi Lamm was the first rabbi in the world to speak out on behalf of the Yoatzot Halacha. Dr. Yoetzet Halacha, Rabbi Dr. Dina Zimmerman is sitting here. I saw her there she is. And at her graduation, which was the first graduation of Yoatzot Halacha, Rabbi Lamm took his granddaughter, then Tohu now Tohu Walker Smith, now Yoetzet Halacha Tohu Walker Smith. He took Tohu over Dina and her Chavrita, and he said, I want there to be a picture of you together with these women because tonight history is being made. Well, history was looking over our shoulder, Rabbi Lamm was there. He was the first rabbi who spoke with tremendous eloquence. I can hear his words resonating with me as if they were spoken yesterday. He spoke about we're at a point of mean below mean. We can't exactly quantify what's happening, but we understand that this is a watershed, and we understand that there's tremendous drama in Jewish life that's going on around this. So, with deep humility, Le'iloi Neshama of Mindy, that Mrs. Mindy now, a woman of, I mentioned yesterday, she was regal. Anyone was regal, Mindy was regal. And at the same time, her sincere love of people, those are two things that don't go together. You know, being regal means you're above everyone. And having a sincere love of people means you're with them. That's the way the Rambam describes the Hamelech, who describes what a king means to be, and those certainly a very rare qualities combined with each other. So, Le'iloi Neshama, I permit myself to use the term Rabbeinu, because Rabbi Lamm was a light and taught so many of us so very much. Okay. We all know that the Torah exempts women from Torah study, but we see Torah study is, in my opinion, second only to Emunat Hashem as in the epicenter of Judaism. What anchors, what defines, what colors our religion. And I'm going to begin with the Gemara in Kiddushin exempting women from Talmud Torah, something which many women today, my students certainly that I have heard this from countless women, find puzzling and discomforting. How can it be? How can it be that the Torah puts us outside of the world of Torah learning, that the Torah expects us perhaps to be illiterate? The Gemara in Kiddushin goes through 5 steps in order to explain to us how women are exempt from Torah learning. I wrote some little notes to myself on one sheet. There's someone here who has those notes. And that's fine. I haven't read The Gemara shows us circuitously through the mitzvah of teaching, the mitzvah of Torah study, and the exemption of women. Why circuitously beginning with the responsibility to teach? Because the Agita Bo Yoram Kalega is not written in Torah, it's written in Sefer Yoshua. So in that fashion, Rabbi in Hilchot Talmud Torah doesn't give it as he does throughout Mishnah Torah. Mitzvah Hasei Min HaTorah Litkot Shofar Shene'eman, and you have, or Kakitut, and you have a puzzle. But in this case, you don't have a puzzle in the Torah telling you that you must learn it. And Rabbi gives the Torah with the mitzvah to teach, and he's following in the way of the Gemara. If you follow along with me in the Gemara, you see there are 5 stages. The Lamm Torah. The writer in Kiddushin, I didn't bring this to you, talks about mitzvot bein ha'ab, the obligations that father has to his son. The Mishnah talks about that, and then the writer says, Tanuga banan ha'ab chayav. I'll be the sources in there. You don't have this because ha'ab chayav bidno, and a string of things. Love to teach him to swim, to teach him a trade, to arrange a marriage for him. And then we read on that Gemara in Kiddushin, Melamdot Torah Menala, and we know. So from that we know the father is responsible to teach Torah. And from this we derive the mitzvah of learning Torah. The Heichad Lo Admirei Abraham, when the father has not taught the son, a person needs, I would say, the son needs to teach himself. And now what the Gemara is going to do is play with the word v'limaditem, because it's not vowelized in the Torah, so you can read it without nikudot, either as v'limaditem or tam ikbenechem, but you can likewise read it u'limaditem, and the Torah is not vowelized. So the Gemara says, if his father has not taught him, he is responsible to teach himself, as it says, u'limaditem. You can read u'limaditem or not as u'limaditem. Then the Gemara asks, well, what about the daughter? How do we know that the word is not created? And then we have that same language, v'limaditem. The Gemara writes it with a yud, so I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's written in Torah without yud. V'limaditem, u'limaditem. Anything that applies to one reading applies to the other reading. So someone who is responsible for v'limaditem is also responsible for u'limaditem. Someone who's responsible to learn is responsible to teach. That's certainly is a credo of Rabbi Lamm's and then the Gemara wants to know, well, how do we know that a woman is not obligated to learn? We could read it, that same word back in the other direction. Anyone who others are obligated to teach has an obligation to teach themselves. And how do we know that the Gemara says that there is no obligation to teach us? The Gemara finishes with and on that the Gemara says no. Now, I have been asked countless times, how did Chazal know that that's the way to read the pasuk? And another way of saying that is, we read Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Hebrew is gender specific. We're either speaking in the male or speaking in the female, or speaking in the plural, or even at the plural. So, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, these are addressed to every Jew, and the male voice is inclusive of both. So I've been asked so many times, why would Chazal read women out of education? Why would Chazal say B'nechem v'lo b'notechem? And it's that I would like to discuss with you tonight. Now, Ba'alei Halacha, through the generations, Rambam onwards, dealt with this in order to make room for women to learn by themselves. She was rewarded for that. And to, in fact, if you go through Sefer Hasidim, that's the 12th century Rabbi Yehuda Hasidim Regensburg. If you go through from Sefer Hasidim onwards, you'll see Ba'alei Halacha pointing out that women must learn, because if you don't learn, you won't know how to do the mitzvah. And this gradually becomes more and more refined through the centuries until you get to the 20th century. And the Chavetz Chaim, who points out that everything that was said applies to years past but does not apply to our world. And within our world, there is no choice but women that women should educate themselves. But I want to deal with this on a philosophical level, because it's that which I'm challenged with over and over. How can it be that Chazal read the pasuk this way? Would we have thought of reading the pasuk this way? So v'dechinu, and v'yoshu v'dolei mimeni, I will answer in two different ways. First, there is a machloket between the first Rabbi. This is not the Baal HaEshkol, they were all from the 12th century. But this is not the Baal HaEshkol, the second Rabbi. It's not the Rabbi of the Hasagot and the Rambam, Rabbi Abraham ben David of Koskier. This is Rabbi Abraham ibn David, who wrote Sefer HaKabbalah. In Sefer HaKabbalah, for most of this learning, I'm going to be using sources, but this, I think I feared putting it down in the sources, and I excused myself by saying it would put me onto a third sheet. Sefer HaKabbalah begins as follows. Amar HaChacham Tiferet Yisharim Rabbeinu Avraham Halevi ben David Zichrono Livracha, Ze Sefer HaKabbalah כתבנו להודיע לתלמידים, כי כל דברי אבותינו ז"ל, חכמי המשנה והתלמוד, כולם מקובלים. Says the Rabbi, the first Rabbi, I've written this in order to show that every single word in the Talmud is received from prior generations. כולם מקובלים. חכם גדול וצדיק מפי חכם גדול וצדיק, ראש ישיבת סיעתו מפי ראש ישיבת סיעתו, עד לאנשי הכנסת הגדולה. Every single word in the Mishnah, in the Gemara, goes back to אנשי כנסת הגדולה. But it didn't start there. שקיבלו מהנביאים זכר כולם לברכה, ולעולם חכמי התלמוד. וכל שכן חכמי המשנה, אפילו דבר קטן לא אמרו מליבם, says the Rabbi, within the words of the Mishnah, within the words of the Gemara, there is not one word which is original. לא אמרו מליבם, חוץ מן התקנות שתקנו בהסכמת כולם, other than, of course, the sorry, when you live in Israel for 50 years, you live in Hebrew. The rabbinic laws, other than rabbinic laws which they legislated in order to prevent violation of the Torah. And he goes on to say if there is a person with Reyach with a hint of apostasy, lomar mipnei shechar nefeku v'kama kavod v'pichas and nismach between them. I'm not going to go on to read this here, I'll summarize this. If you want to say that the Rachmanot in the Gemara are an indication of the fact that this one has this view, that one has that. The views of their own. No. What they are doing is retrieving that which was forgotten over the course of the generations due to the travail of the generations. So the attempt in the Gemara is to access perfect logic, which is the divine logic, and thereby to retrieve those words that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave literally. As distinct from that, my friends, you have Rambam, my friends. You have the Rambam at the beginning of Hilchot Mamrim, who says in Perek Aleph of Hilchot Mamrim, Deidin HaKadosh Yerushalayim, Ikar Torah Shabbat והם עמוד ההוראה מהם משעת היוצא ומסתכל. The essence of Torah is the Sanhedrin, they did Haggadah, which sits in Lishat Kedazit in the Beit Midrash. In other words, Torah Shabbat is a living, pulsating entity. And the essence of Torah Shabbat is in Beit Haggadah. In Perek Beit, I'm going to read this to you. Beit Haggadah, שדרשו באחת מידות, כפי מה שנראה לעיניהם שהדין כך, ודנו דין. Beit Haggadah, which debated through the midot שהתורה נפגשת and reached the conclusion. ועלה בהם דין אחר ונראה לו טעם אחר, ולסתור אותו הדין. And a later Beit arises. We're not talking about takanot, Gezerot and takanot. We're talking about an interpretation of Rashat HaTorah. And Rambam says, if a later Beit comes and disagrees with the interpretation, the mitzvah, which was derived from the Torah, the details, the halachot, I would say, which are derived from the Torah, ונראה לו פעם אחר לזכור אותה דין. דין here doesn't mean law, it means the debate. הרי זה סותר ודן כפי מה שיראה בעיניו. The later Beit can disagree with the interpretation and expound the pasuk as the later Beit sees fit. So when my students come and say, did HaKadosh Baruch Hu intend women to be illiterate? With humility, I say, there's a context, and I'm going to discuss that context. And Rabbi Banech Mikdash, and they said they didn't return to the Shpat Kedazit. And none of us can predict if the Sanhedrin will follow Rambam, what the Sanhedrin will then say about this mistake. So I say this to my students, and I say this to anyone who asks me, because it can be deeply distressing philosophically to think that HaKadosh Baruch Hu thought that women should be uneducated. However, I would like to look further into the Gemara at a series of drashot of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer, as he said, the Gemara parenthetically inserts into the Mishnah, and what I'd like to do is a defense of Rabbi Eliezer. Let us see if I succeed, and let us see if you agree with me. Let's start with the Gemara in Sota. In Yeshua Zechut Torah, that's the introduction. Yes, Zechut Torah Shalachat, yes, Zechut Torah Beit Shalim, yes, Zechut Torah Kiddush. Mishnah tells us that after the Sota drinks the mighty Magid of Rabbi, the punishment is not necessarily immediate, or the impact is not necessarily immediate. If she has merit, if she has performed mitzvot, and there's very interesting discussion about the merit of Torah learning, then the effects of those waters could be postponed for 1 year, or for 2 years, or for 3 years. מכאן אומר בן עזאי היה אדם מלמד תורה, שאם תשתה תדע שהזכות חוללה. Ben Azai says from this, well, from here we learn that a man must teach his daughter Torah, because if she drinks of those bitter waters, it is vital that she understand that if she has merit, the merit will extend the time before she is punished. I would say if her friend drinks, it's vital for her to understand if she doesn't see the punishment immediately, she should not lose faith in the Torah. She should not question the Torah, because she should understand that there are leniencies built into the system. That's what Ben Azai says. For that reason, it is vital the man teaches the Torah. And then we have Rabbi Eliezer, who says, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Kolam Lamei B'Tot Torah, Lomdat Tiflut, and the Gemara inserts in this the word Ki'ilu, which comes from the Tosef. Amar Rabbi Abahu, my Talmud Rabbi Eliezer, Dichtiv Ali Chochma Shachanti Horma, Kevan Shenifnasa Chochma Adam Nifnasa Imo Armuni. So we have the drinking of bitter waters. And then Azai says, from here we know that you must teach your daughter Torah, because otherwise she may misunderstand and lose faith. And Rabbi Eliezer says, if you teach your daughter Torah, it's as if you teach her Tiflut. On that, Rashi comments, שמתוכך היא מבינה הרמונית ועושה דבריה בהצנע, that the reason you would want to teach your daughter is because to teach your daughter Torah, she's going to learn to exploit the loopholes in the Torah. She will become cunning. I just haven't parenthetically, are women really more cunning than men? I think when people are cunning, or can be cunning, or we could be continuously, as Rashi is a contextualist. So Rashi interprets in terms of the mitzvah of Sotah. Why, you will teach your daughter Tiflut, how is that related to Sotah? Well, Sotah sequestered herself with another man, and therefore was caught, and she will learn to exploit the loopholes in the law. Rashi is thus explaining Rabbi Eliezer's position. Rambam explains Rabbi Eliezer's position as follows. Isha she'lamdat Torah yesh la sechar. A woman who learns Torah is rewarded, and in no Yisrael Ha'if, he says she is not in Tzubak or Star, and someone who's in Tzubak says always rewarded more greatly than one who simply is inspired from within. There's a certain logic to that. And he goes on to say that even though she is rewarded, Sibur Chachamim Shalom Lamed Adam B'Tot Torah, Mipnei Shalom, now he's giving his reasoning. Sibur Chachamim, my husband points out, I'm not going to read this, but in the 2 paragraphs that my husband in the second volume of his Truth finds about 25 places in the Rambam where you have Sibur Chachamim. My husband never used Korea Kashut. So he lists a host of places where there's Sibur Chachamim and it never refers to a mitzvah, but rather to sage advice. Back to Rabbi. ציבור חכמים שלא ילמד אדם ממצוות תורה, מפני שלא אנשים אין דעתם מכוונת להתלמד. Says Rabbi, most women, their minds are not focused to absorb learning. אלא הם רוצות דברי תורה ודברי הבית לפי הלימוד דעתם, but they make the Torah into nonsense. אמרו חכמים כל המלמד בתורה לומדת תתלות, and then he goes on to say, במה דברים אמורים בתורה שבעלתם. התורה שבכתב לא ילמד אותה לכתחילה ואם לומדת אינו כלומדת תתלות. I think there's a big key here. Rabbi says if you teach, you can apply what Chazal are saying to the oral transmission, but you can't apply what Chazal are saying about titlut to the written Torah. Once you have a text in front of you, you can't possibly say lomdat titlut. We're going to try to ferry out this puzzle, but Rabbi is pointing to something extremely important. If the transmission is oral, then one can say there is potential here, and I will expand on this when we get to the Gemara and Kamafatra very shortly. There is potential here for misinterpretation. That's not the case when you have a text. Now, when my husband looks, I'm not going to read this, his words are marvelous, and I give them to you to read. When this comes from Philip Hillel on his Shuvot. When my husband looks at the Machloket between Ben Azai and Eliezer, he says, Ben Azai is not saying, teach your daughter Torah so that if she is a Sotah, she'll know better than to presume she can get away with things if a year passes or 2 years passes. My husband says what Ben Azai is doing is illustrating the cost of illiteracy. And you have here debates about the cost of scholarship. I don't mean the financial cost. The cost of scholarship versus the cost of literacy. And Rabbi Eliezer is concerned about instruction for reasons that I hope to be able to show you. Whereas Ben Azai is concerned about the cost of ignorance, and ignorance exacts a very serious cost. And he gives one illustration of the cost of ignorance. Let's go a little further into Rabbi Eliezer. Look at the bottom of this sheet. Yerushalmi himself. Another well-known and somewhat peculiar text. Matrona Shalat Rabbi Eliezer. That's Rabbi Eliezer. מפני מה חטא אחת במעשה העגל, והן מתים לה בשלוש מיתות. An important woman, an affluent woman, comes to Rabbi Eliezer and says to him, you know, when we read about Chet HaEgel, you see that people die, some of them by the sword, some of them die by drinking the water into which the egel is pulverized and mixed in, that's reminiscent of the soda. And some die by mageta, by a plague from on high. So the Matrona wants to know, how can it be that 3 groups of people commit the same sin, and nevertheless within the Torah there are 3 punishments? It's a good question. It's a very good question. Rabbi Eliezer answers, Amar la ein chachmata shel isha ela b'chuluha. Rabbi Eliezer says, a woman has no wisdom other than at the womb. Shel Amar, I don't think maybe spindle, I'm not sure. It's a reading instrument. And he quotes from, פרשת שמירת שדה, וכל אישה חוכמת לב בידיה תבוא. אמר לו סדנו, שלא להשיבת בבית, אני מתכונה, הבנתי נגד 300 מעשר בכל שנה. When he says there's no wisdom in a woman other than at the moon, the pillar, right there on the pattern, that if any of you go into so many patterns up to below, you will not just pass the sacred pillar below, you will pass pillar beneath, which is an outgrowth. It's marvelous poetic justice. Pillar below is named for Ein Ahmad Shah and pillar beneath is named for in any formula says this song, in order not to respond with one word of Torah to this woman, you have lost for me 300 bushels of maaser every year. In other words, she has been spoiled. Amara Rabbi Eliezer said in Sanhokos, "V'sarfu divrei Torah va'al minasrin nashim," that words of Torah be burnt and not given over to women. U'chiyatza amuna Talmidat Rabbi Yosef Yitam. Lama mata mishi. When she went out, the Talmidei said, "Listen, she asked a very good question. Dismiss her with that, but tell us the answer." And then Rabbi Eliezer gives a very good answer for Misha. He did not when Moshe says, "Mila Hashem Elai," that was one word to add together. These words of Moshe Rabbeinu. When he says, "Mila Hashem Elai," he was referring to after due process in Beit Din. So anyone for whom there were witnesses and there was prior warning, היה Beit Din אחרת. ולא התריה היה נבדק בסוטה. And if there were witnesses but not התראה or warning in advance, the punishment was like that of the סוטה. לא ידעים ולא התריה היה Beit Din. I want to get into Rabbi Eliezer's. We saw Rabbi Eliezer says, "Palam Yalei B'Tod Torah, Ki'ilu Lamdat Tivut." We saw Rabbi Eliezer says, "Yisarfu Divrei Torah va'al yinasru nashim." I want to bring you two Gemara that I want to address this. The Gemara in Sukkah tells us that Rabbi Eliezer spent the Shabbat in the Gamil Adon during Sukkot, and people came to him with questions. Tamur Abanan Maaseh Rabbi Eliezer Shabbat, Gamil Adon, B'Sharuchu Shloshim Halachot B'Sukkah. 12 אמר להם שמעתי, 18 אמר להם שמעתי. Which has the, it says, in any event, Rabbi Eliezer said, I'll use the language in the Gemara before correction. 12 of them I heard the answer, 18 of them I did not hear the answer, I did not receive the answer. You only say what you have received, what is transmitted to you. Amar lachem nizkartuni lomar davar shelo shamati mipei Rabbi. Rabbi Eliezer says this Talmud, he says, "You are forcing me to say something that I did not receive from my rabbi." מימיי לא קידמני לאדם בבית מקדש, לא ישנתי בבית מקדש, לא שנת טבע, לא שנת המים, לא הנחתי אדם בבית מקדש ויצאתי, סליחה, I have never said a word that was not translated. Go on from this to the Gemara, it's very interesting, which tells us about two episodes that took place either, Rashi says, during Moed, perhaps. The first one with Rabbi Yoshua and the second with Rabbi Elias. The first one is as follows. תנו רבנן מעשה רבי יוחנן בן רוקה ורבי יהודה, חיסמה שהלכו להכיר בני רבי יהושע רבי יהושע בן lucky in that's in the and we have a mitzvah that essentially visit his Rebbe during the Moed, and two of Rabbi Eliezer Talmidim came to see him during the Moed. So he said, what's new? What's new meaning? What's new in the Beit Midrash? What pressure did you hear? They said, we are your Talmidim and we drink of your waters. In other words, we're going to say a Torah before you. Who are we? He said, nevertheless, you're Talmidim. But the Torah multiplies. It is an organic being. There is no such thing as Beit Midrash without creativity, without innovation. He brings a wonderful together. דברי חכמים כדרבונות ומסקנות נטועים בעלי הסודות מבוטי אחד. Words of Torah are like cattle prods which are planted. And you say to yourself, wait, cattle prods are iron. They're inanimate. Something that's planted is something which grows. And that's such a perfect picture of Torah. It's planted and it grows. And they tell him the Chidush, and he says, look, you had an argument and you were going to deny this from me. And then he adds, he's inspired by what they say, to himself adding another. That's episode 1. And that occurs during the Moed, we call the Moed. Episode number 2 occurs with Rabbi Eliezer. You may be familiar with Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua as the two disputed Rabbi Yochanan and Zechariah and Jerusalem during the time of the siege. They are many times very true. So the Gemara asks us, why didn't they answer him when they were laid the head down? Why didn't they answer him straight away? And the answer is, well, it's because the story of Rabbi Yossi this is after the second ellipsis. Maaseh Rabbi Yossi ben Dormaskit shalach ma'akir b'nei Rabbi Eliezer b'Luz. Amar lo lachidush hayav beit hamidrash hayom. Rabbi Yossi ben Dormaskit came to visit Rabbi Eliezer in Luz, and he asked the same question that Rabbi Yoshua did. And Rabbi Yossi ben Dormaskit sadly chose to answer the question, and his Rebbe asked him. So he said, Amar le nimnu v'gamu amor u'mo'av ma'asrim ma'aser ani b'shviti. What this means is, the Shvita year, like this year, Ammon and Moab were conquered by Moshe Rabbeinu, not by Yehoshua. And Moshe Rabbeinu, according to Beit HaMikdash, left them out of Shemitah, left out the conquered areas on the eastern side of the Jordan, Ammon and Moab, so that the poor would have where to go to get Shemitah and Peah during Shemitah. Amarlo. So that's what he said. They stood up and they were counted. This is the Midrash of Sanhedrin. So they stood up and they counted and they moved alone umoad ma'asim ma'aser ani b'shvi'it. In other words, it's not that they have to separate ma'aser ani, a tithe to the poor, during the Shvita. Amar lo, 1 minute. Amar lo Yossi, shot yadecha v'kaber elecha. He said, Yossi, stretch out your hand, and your eyes will fall into your hand. In other words, Rabbi Eliezer blinded him. Worry not, at the end of the story, it was good in it. But at this point, Rabbi Yossi then has been blinded. But pay attention to what Rabbi Eliezer says. Hashat, one second. Amar lo lech emor lahem. Al tachushu min yadechem. He said to Rabbi Yossi from the Dentor Masjid, go back and tell them in the Beit Midrash, pay no attention to your having ruled. In other words, the Sanhedrin, as according to the rules of the Sanhedrin, voted, the Chachamim all voted, and they ruled alone Moab Asrim Aser Ani B'Shvi'it. But Eliezer says, go back and tell them, pay no attention to your power, to your ruling. Kach Mekublani min Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Eliezer says, I have a tradition from my Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Sheshamani Rabbo, v'Raboni Rabbo, Hilcheta Moshe Sinai, Amon u'Moab Ma'asrim Ma'aser Ani B'Shvi'it. Do you hear what's going on? Now, Rabbi Eliezer says to Rabbi, he's blinded Rabbi Yossi and Domestic, his Talmud, and he says to him, you go back and tell them, pay no heed to your debate, pay no heed to your ruling. You ruled alone Moab Ma'asrim Ma'aser Ani B'Shvi'it. Go back and tell them. I have the tradition from my Rabbi, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who has a tradition from his Rabbi, from his Rabbi, from his Rabbi, from his Rabbi, all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu, that Amon u'Moab Ma'asrim Ma'aser Ani B'Shvi'it. What's going on here? What was Rabbi Eliezer objecting to? The bottom line was the identical bottom line. He was objecting to the process. The process was a process of debate and of ruling. And what Rabbi Eliezer wanted was instead a reliance upon tradition, not a reliance upon logical reasoning, but a reliance upon vision. That reason, in Maryam Sukha, tells us that he refused to answer questions, the answer of which he did not know. I think of this as curators and innovators. You know, the role of a curator is to preserve against change, to organize, to create access. The role of an innovator is to leave everything one, to leave nothing unchanged. And you have here in Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua a meeting of two world apples. But I want to take this back to women's learning and try to understand Rabbi Eliezer's position, and I'll do so by means of the Gemara in Kabbalah. The Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Ram Zokor Kol Ha'ish Latov Yehoshua Ben Gamrashno. There's more than one Yehoshua Ben Gamrashno. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of God, Yehoshua Ben Gamrashno is to be remembered in the Torah. She'emalehu nishtakat Torah Yisrael. Not for him, he didn't have Torah today. שבתחילה מי שיש לו אב למדו תורה. מי שאין לו אב לא היה לומד תורה, מה איתו? שהוא לימד יותר אותה. ולימדתם אתם. It's not for Yoshua ben Lamm that wouldn't have Torah. Because initially, Torah was based upon the mitzvah and the Torah of the father teaching his son Torah. Says the Gemara, מי שיש לו אב למדו תורה, מי שאין לו אב לא ילמד תורה. The result was that someone who had a father learned Torah. Someone who did not have a father, or someone whose father was unable to teach him, did not learn Torah. התקינו שיהיו לו 70 מלמדי תינוקות בירושלים. מה ידרוש מצוות תצא Torah? When they saw the system wasn't working, so then they established in Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh a center for learning. ועדיין מי שיש לו אב היה מעלו ומלמדו, מי שאין לו אב לא היה מלמד. But on the other hand, this didn't work either, because it was still dependent upon the initiative of the father to take the child or the son to Yerushalayim to learn. התקינו שיהיו מושיבים בכל פרק ופרק ומכניסים אותם בפרק זין ובפרק זין. ומי שהיה רבו כועס עליו מהגיתו ויוצא. עד שבא יהושע בן נון. So the next step, after establishing a center for learning in Yerushalayim, that did not work to get Torah to people. So the next step was to establish schools to 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, but there was a problem because we begin educating at that age. Those who are not willing to accept Godel Imo. עד שבא יהושע בן נון ותיקן שיהיו לו 70 מלמדי תינוקות בכל מדינה ומדינה ובכל עיר ועיר ומכניסים אותם בין 6 ובין 7. Until Yoshua ben Lamm came and he established school, elementary education. There's a revolution here that's around a little bit before the time of the Quran. Yoshua ben Lamm, I always ask myself, how do you do this? People by then, could have enjoyed this talent. He was married to Martha Baptist, who we know was one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest woman of the generation. So I gather that that's how the system was funded. When you think of Rabbi Lamm's brilliance, and you think of how much time he spent raising the funds, but then you say to yourself, yes, that's Rabbi Lamm's greatness, the willingness to do what it took to educate a generation. So, Yoshua ben Lamm is remembered for the fact that we have Torah investment. Where does this relate to Rabbi Eliezer? It took another 1,000 years after Yoshua ben Lamm until we got to Sarashvili and the establishment of school in Jerusalem. Another 1,000 years. You had individual women here and there who were born into the right family, who were daughters in the family which had no sons, or whose fathers instructed them. But on the whole, if you look at Tosfot and Rabbot, about the women are obligated in Zidon, Tosfot mentioned that women are illiterate. There's a question of whether they don't say to see them because they don't understand. That is the condition of women. And it seems to me that Rabbi Eliezer's concern was not a gender concern. It seems to me when I read, when I string together the Gemara, it seems to me that his concern was taking Torah out of the Beit Midrash. You have to not remember, why do you not answer my She's been asking you an excellent question. She comes over to you, the Shunanit would listen to our show, Shabbat, okay? She's asking a wonderful question. You give a good answer to your Talmudim. Why do you not answer? When he says, Yisarfu Divrei Torah, V'Ari Masul Noshem, I think his concern was because Torah was transmitted orally, Torah Shabbat was transmitted. The danger of separating Torah from the Beit Midrash is very big. And I think that explains everything that the Rambam says about Tiklut this year. And the Torah Shabbat is not Tiklut, the Torah Shabbat is Tiklut. You can't learn Torah Shabbat without that. Even though it's all in writing. I mean, today we have Steinsaltz's Gemara, we have the Art Scroll Gemara, but without these modern tools, there's no way to learn by yourself. It's a non-punctuated, non-vowelized text, non-vowelized native, it's a non-punctuated text. How do you know where there's a question, where there's an answer? How do you know to read it? The answer is you need a Rabbi. You can't do it on your own. And I believe that Rabbi Eliezer is concerned about the consequences of taking Torah out of the Beit Midrash. To me, that answers his stress upon tradition, his stress upon, I say only that which I heard, which was transmitted to me, but especially what seems to us as an outrageous refusal to answer the Matrona. Here she is not just an important but wealthy woman. She is a woman who is charitable. She is supporting his son. He doesn't know that. That doesn't matter. She's supporting many people. And she asks a question of, why did you not answer her? And I believe the answer is that severing the Torah from the Beit Midrash is a very dangerous thing. And as a matter of fact, we see that today. We see that today in academia, where academia is not connected with Torah. The words that were spoken earlier by Rabbi Bolton about Torah being primary. Well, that means the Beit Midrash is primary. In the Beit Midrash, you don't merely learn content. You become part of the tradition that goes back to generations. The Gemara in Eruvin says as follows: says, you know why I am able to reason so sharply? It's because I sat several rows behind Rabbi Meir, and I saw Rabbi Meir from the back. If I had seen him from the front, I would have been able to reason far more sharply. That's what goes on in the Beit Midrash. Midot are transmitted, Yirat Shamayim is transmitted. There's the Chazal tells us the Torah is written in Eish Shkala or Eish Levana, black fire and white fire. I've always pictured that as the black fire is the letters and the white fire is the spaces in them. And the white fire is transmitted. It's a fire, it's a bread, it's a fire. And I believe that if Rabbi Eliezer were to enter what has proliferated in our time, the Beit Midrash for women, frankly, I think he would be delighted. I think he would be stunned, and I think he would be delighted. The Maharsha comments on that Gemara in בהחלטת בהסרת פנים בין יש להבין בקריצת עיניים ובזעזעת שפתיים, דהיינו רואות את מורך שמעניין לו ומתחיל. Maharsha says there's one spoken language, sometimes it's a question of word, facial expression, sometimes it's a question of tone of voice, and I would add to it, it's a question of content. You're in a daily interaction with adults and you don't just learn content. That's the difference between a daily interaction and academia, which does not have the responsibility to transmit values, because they have a responsibility to transmit knowledge. And it's billions of Yeshiva University, it's billions of Rabbi Lamm, and the marriage of these worlds that can only take place in the daily fashion. So my bottom line is, I don't think that today Rabbi Eliezer will be saying, we say, food creates the Ali Nasul machine, but he would definitely be, in my opinion, after that, and I think perhaps I would have the opportunity to discuss. But I think he will rejoice at what has flowered and is flowering today within the progression, context of Kedusha, in the context of Yerushalayim, in the context of and Rabbi Lamb's very pioneers. There was no one about for 50 years.
On behalf of the Lamm family, on behalf of my siblings, on behalf of the city, we thank you all for coming. I want to thank you for this